Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a new episode of Rocket Lab Weekly. This episode is the aftermath of Q3 earnings. The stock hit $22, and this guy started singing. So I would ask you how your week was, but you kind of gave it away in this tweet already. Please let me know if there is no sound.
Guys, I wanted to check in. It's been a crazy couple weeks. I appreciate all the congratulations and the thank yous and everything like that. But like things wouldn't be that they're not that crazy, you know? Like if things were getting that crazy, there'd be signs, you know? Guys, I wanted to check.
So how has your week been, Mr. Matt?
It's fun. It's been a lot of fun seeing a lot of people at work, and a lot of them obviously follow the channel and have heeded the advice of picking up Rocket Lab as a long-term investment, and so therefore it's been a really good upbeat past couple days.
So when you go to work, you look like this meme on the concert when you come in and the coworkers are like, "Wow!"
Pretty much, yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I'm like that guy. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun. A lot of people messaging me, and I think at the end of the day, it's really nice because I'm glad everyone's doing well, making money, and starting to see the value in the organization. And it's just a great testament to all the hard work that the guys are doing, not just in New Zealand, but across the U.S. I mean, you talk about New Mexico, in Long Beach, in Virginia. I mean, there's literally places all over, Denver, even in Colorado. There's places literally all over the U.S. and New Zealand that are contributing to the success of this organization. And so all that, although it's kind of sent through me as a liaison, it really should be directed towards them as great folks and stewards of our capital when we invest in such a great company. So thank you to the folks on the ground that are sending rockets and building spacecraft, and Sir Peter Beck and Adam that are doing such a great job as leaders.
Yeah, I must say it's amazing to see so many people eating the money sandwich, or I think we have minted a lot of millionaires or multimillionaires with this stock. And I saw a tweet from a guy because I always say that this channel is not financial advice. It's more like we're sharing our research. We're having fun. We're being the boys will be boys. This is what we usually talk about. And one guy was like sending in a tweet that, Vince, you were the spark that started my due diligence. And I'm like, yes, that's what I want to be. I want to be the spark, and it was like such a good tweet for me. And I'm also so happy seeing all these people making money. It's been almost too good to be true. So I fear, as you said once, we're going to wake up from this dream. And yeah.
It definitely does feel a little bit surreal, right? I mean, it's kind of like the first time I saw 7 figures in my bank account, right? It was like, it's still the same me, still the same person, right? And the fun thing is the decisions that you make today and the investments that you make today will pay dividends future if you're making the appropriate decisions. And so it's kind of surreal in the respect that you see these numbers starting to flow in, but it's based off of previous decisions that you made months, if not sometimes years ago. And so it just goes to show the value of thinking and understanding that in order to become a millionaire, in order to get to where you want to go, you have to start thinking like that way in advance before the numbers or the results actually start up. And it shows and talks about consistency and continued discipline throughout whatever you're doing, whether that's investing in the stock market, whether that's through work, starting a business, etc. But it just kind of continues to imprint on my mind, that sort of methodology that you need to consistently focus on. And it's not just like an immediate result, right? I mean, sometimes, yes, day traders can get lucky and they can see hundreds of percent, or if not, thousands of percent over the course of a couple of weeks. But for most of us, I would say it requires a little bit more long-term planning and discipline, and the hope that at the end of the day, you're making the right decisions. So
Yeah. All right. Oh, by the way, I want to shout out for Curtis. He sent a stock for my kiddo, and he sent one for your kid also. No, he sent for your friend. So I just want to update you guys. I don't have a baby yet. My wife is in week 39. This is baby number 4, and 2 kids out of the 4 were born in week 39, and 1 kid was born in week 37. So definitely, I have the statistically any second I can get a child. And what's crazy is we have an interview booked with Sir Peter Beck on Thursday, and I'm like, that's 1 day before the due date. So I need the kid like out before Sir Peter Beck or out after. Well, I was thinking if I don't make it for the interview, maybe like I record a few questions, and then when we like, or maybe like some of you guys ask the questions, and then we superimpose my face. Like, let's say if you ask the question, we superimpose my face on your head, and then it's like still me in the interview. No, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah, whatever we need to do, man. You have some pretty good questions. Of course, we've been collaborating as we did last time, and obviously it's been a lot of fun. At least we get a little bit more of like a cool down period. So I was letting it digest a little bit because, as you know, that it was basically a 36-hour turnaround, and my fear was it was going to be comparable to what we did in 2Q. But luckily, it's delayed by a week. So now it's 36 hours plus a week comparatively. But also wanted to shout out Curtis as well. Continued support is always much appreciated. You're the man.
Yeah. Awesome, guys. So I was thinking we go through the Rocket Lab related news this week and then space related news. And then I think that we will do a recap of the earnings. And I think a lot of people have on their minds, maybe not, maybe it's just me. Apparently, I'm a Rocket Lab bear now. But the valuation of the company, because we did run just a few months ago. We were at $4 something, and now we touched 22, and that is a big run. And I'm sure a lot of you want to know if we think that this is sustainable or what is our prediction. So I think that we do it in this order. Cool. So I have a question. I don't understand what is going on in Rocket Lab land, because I was told that the engine blew up, the site is not progressing, and there's definitely not going to be anything ready in 2025. And yet Rocket Lab is posting all these pictures of progress. So please advise, Matt, what's going on?
AI is getting better, man, and that's all I can say is that these computer graphics are just so much more advanced than when Rose was at the front of the Titanic with Jack in 1997. I'm just gonna say that this has been a huge house of cards that just has been continuing to build. And Peter, man, he's been going at it about 2 years shy of 2 decades, and he's really put any money that he's been able to receive from investors, the SPAC money he got in 2021, into really good graphic designers, and I think that that's really what we're still seeing here.
All right, yeah. So all these people who were telling us that Rocket Lab is a fake company, they were right after all. So all jokes aside, I think I'm going to ask this in the interview, but you guys remember how like last year it was like we're going to have Neutron on the pad by the end of 2024, and then we were like speculating like, why are they saying have it on the pad? Is it like going to launch or not launch? Like that was the discussion. And I'm like, it kind of feels like we're going that way, because there's so many parts of the rocket that is ready and being built in place. I'm like, they might make, I mean, what I can see is maybe we're not going to have an assembled Neutron on the pad, but I think definitely like, the Lego pieces of the rocket is going to be on the pad. What do you think about that?
When you were walking through that, I definitely think that there's an opportunity for dry integration and putting a Neutron on the pad. Is it, we're within that 9-month time period, right? So it could happen within 3 months. It could happen within 6 months. I definitely don't know, but it's within that 3 to 6 month window. In my opinion, I don't within the next 2 to 3 weeks before, or I guess it's more like 2 to 4 weeks before you end up the year. I don't know if it's possible to get it on the pad prior to. I still think there's a lot of things that need to happen in the right timings, but I definitely see within the next 3 to 6 months, there's definitely going to be a dry integrated Neutron rocket. And the thing I was actually thinking about when you were walking through that was I was trying to remember what SpaceX had done. I was trying to remember if before they launched the Falcon 9, no, I stand corrected. The Falcon 9 initially was not going to be reusable, or it was something that was added later, if I remember correctly. So they were using and launching the Falcon 9, and then eventually they retrofitted it to be reusable after the fact. Because I was going to say, remember those cool tests back, like this is literally like 10 years ago at this point, but it might have been 8 to 10 years ago, but they were doing those like hover tests with the Falcon 9s where like they launched it up like 200 feet and then they would slowly bring it down to like land. I don't remember if you remember that piece or not, but I remember, or maybe they did that more with the Starship. But regardless, I was kind of curious if they would actually try to do one of those before they officially try to launch it into space. But I think it's probably easier to just go ahead, launch it into space and into orbit, actually, and try to figure out the hovering piece later. Because, I mean, they've been able to launch rockets into orbit before. What they haven't been able to do ever, meaning Rocket Lab, is hover and land. So fingers crossed a little bit. But in terms of what you're asking, I don't know, man. That's a tight timeline. The next 6 weeks is going to be tough to be able to get an integrated vessel on the pad.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is that they seem to be very well on target with the timeline. Like when the timeline was like launch, 2024, it was like a nail biter. Even back before they changed, it was like, yeah, it's very tough. We don't know if they can do it. And now it feels like the mid 2025. It feels like, yeah, they have like a leeway. Like many things can go wrong, and then they will still get it done.
I guess we'll see. Yeah, I don't know. I'm cautiously optimistic that we're obviously within the next 6 to 9 months of seeing something on the pad. I just think that it's still too early. I still think that they need to do wet tests for a lot of things before they actually put something on the pad. So we'll see. But everything seems to be going along in parallel pretty well, and I'm curious to see when they actually stack it up how it looks. And I'm curious because, like, remember when? Well, I'm a pretty big car guy, not that big, but I enjoy cars. I like seeing the concept cars come out. I've been to a few auto shows, and you always see these concept cars come out, right? And then you're like, oh man, this thing is going to look so cool. And then you see the concept car at the auto show or whatever, and then it hits the assembly line, and you're like, this doesn't look nearly as good. So I'm kind of curious if it's the same, right? I mean, Neutron looks very sleek on CGI and what we've seen in terms of the initial design. And so the first one, I'm curious if it's going to look kind of like a Frankensteinish sort of thing put together. But from what I've seen, that big 3D printer that they have in Virginia, it looks, or sorry, not Virginia, in Long Beach, it looks like it's got a lot of high quality outputs already. So it doesn't look like it's going to be Frankenstein together. It looks like it's going to be a pretty good showcase of what it looks like kind of going forward. So I'm hoping it doesn't look like it's, remember when the Starship was like really ratty looking when they first were bringing it out? And now obviously the Starship looks phenomenal, but the first Starships looked like absolute garbage. So I'm fingers crossed that the production quality on these initial Neutrons looks great.
Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna see. I mean, the other picture that is on the earnings call, you know, when he's standing in the hungry hippo, like that kind of looks like a pixelated. I don't know if I can bring up that picture, but I definitely understand where you're coming from. That, you know, the first one is like some parts of it is just thrown together to do the test. Let me see. No, it's actually much better than I remembered. Do you see the screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's much better than I remembered. I somehow remember that this, like, you see that the circle is like a little bit like it has like straight lines in it, but the actual fairing is very like nice and round. Okay, whatever. Forget what I was saying. We have a super chat question here. Cheers to the Rocket Lab family. In 10 years, what's the realistic price range? Could this ever be $150 stock? Go ahead and answer first, and then and then I'll let you answer it. What I have learned from Palantir is that you have like a fair value of a company, what you think it can be, and then you have like a value that the market assigns to the company, and then sometimes like the two can be very different from each other. Fair value wise, in 10 years, I think I have Rocket Lab at around $65 to $80. But again, if the market is extremely enthusiastic about the stock, could be $150. We don't know what environment we hit in 10 years. It's possible. I feel more confident in the 65-80 prediction, but 150 is possible.
Very good. Yeah, it's tough to say, man. I mean, in 10 years' time, $150, of course, there's the current share count, which is about 500 million, 501 million. Thank you, Fool's Gold. You're the man, the myth, and the legend. Cigars are for closers only. I agree with that. I need to go smoke a nice cigar today. I've had like a bunch of Cubans just sitting in my humidor downstairs. But anyway, I need to get after them. Back to the question at hand. I mean, so with 501 million shares at hand on the open market, that would mean you need about a $75 billion market cap to feed that. Now, of course, we're going to have continued dilution unless they buy back stock. So, but for simplicity's sake, let's just say, you're talking about a $75 to $80 billion market cap, right? I see it's plausible. And the why I think it's plausible is by that point, 10 years down the line, let's just take, for example, the medium-term goal that Peter Beck had. So Peter Beck had a kind of medium-term goal for Neutron of about 24 launches per annum, so twice a month. I think that's rather conservative. Let's just use that $55 million price. That's $1.3 billion in terms of revenue just from that alone. And then let's just say, for example, by that point, you're getting close to 30 or so launches from Electron alone in 10 years' time, which I think is also very conservative. You're talking about $300-400 million with respect to that. Space Systems will be worth about $1 billion on its own, and then you're not even talking about the constellation revenue that will be acquired through that. So you're talking about a business at that point that's making likely at a base case scenario $3 billion per year. And so to me, I think it's very plausible at that point you're going to be making $1.5 billion in net income. I don't think you're going to hit a 50% net margins or anything like that, but I'm just using kind of rough magnitudes here. I mean, at a minimum, I think you're going to be making $3 billion in revenue. The likelihood is going to be more, but I'm just saying in terms of revenue that you're actually generating, likely to be closer to $1.5 billion, $2 billion in net income at that point. So to me, a $75 billion market cap isn't out of the realm. What I can see today, which would be a lot easier, I agree with Vince, probably like a $75 to $100 billion, $75 to $100 stock price will be easier to kind of imagine, just based off the fact that 75 billion, you need some really monumental growth at that point. And it could be there, right? I think the problem with me making that $150 gap at the moment is just not necessarily understanding what the terminal rate is for space systems revenue for the constellation that Rocket Lab is going to be putting together. But if you just take a 50,000 foot view, right? Give me some rope here. The one thing that Rocket Lab is doing that SpaceX is not doing, and to give everyone a light reminder with what I'm about to say, SpaceX is about to go to a tender offer, meaning selling some of the private shares that they had, whether it's some previous shareholders that want to sell out, some employees, etc. But they're going to be tender offering about $250 to $260 billion for that kind of valuation. And so if you think about that, they're going to be doing that off about $13 or so billion in revenue for fiscal year 24, and they're continuing to grow. Now, going back to Rocket Lab, what is Rocket Lab doing that, in my opinion, SpaceX isn't doing? And I think if you ask that, I don't think SpaceX is out there generating satellites for other people. And I could be wrong on this, and I hope somebody corrects me in the chat if I'm speaking out of my ass. But what I do know is that SpaceX is spending a lot of time with Starlink and making sure that those Starlinks get to space. And that's obviously a huge revenue generator for them. And it's been a huge piece of why their revenue has skyrocketed as it has. But what I don't see them doing is I don't see them creating other satellites for other people. I see them providing launch capabilities to other people, but they're not building the satellites themselves. Where I think that is an advantage that Rocket Lab has. They have the ability to make a lot of reaction wheels. They have the ability to make their own solar panels and create items for things like NASA. But I don't see SpaceX creating satellites on behalf of NASA. I do see them, however, doing a lot of launching and stuff like that for those. And another thing I wanted to note as well is one of the things that if you look in specifically to SpaceX's revenue is you'll see in 2022, 2023, they did 1 to 2, maybe even 3 launches specifically for human capable launches back and forth to the space station. And that gives you a higher tier of revenue than if you were to just do a normal satellite launch. And specifically, I found data from 2022. I didn't find it for 2023. But in 2022, SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket launched 3 times to the International Space Station with humans on board. And they got $700 million in revenue. What we've now seen is, sorry, I'm going on a huge tangent, but I'm just like flowing. So I apologize here, Vince.
Just go ahead.
I'll hand it back to you. What I have, and when we talked with Peter just a few months back, we asked him specifically if Neutron was human capable, and the answer is yes. His response, though, was coupled with the fact that at the moment there's 1.5 players for a market that at the moment is kind of small, right? If you think about it, the TAM is pretty big, but if you already have 2 players that are kind of occupying that market, it makes a third player wanting to enter it in a pretty risky and also kind of maybe tight marketplace unwilling to do so. Now that you have Boeing kind of stepping back, maybe that TAM is growing large enough that it makes sense for the Neutron vessel to start considering again that space travel and getting people back and forth to the International Space Station, in which, if you think about it, you know, Peter's thoughts were 24 launches per annum for Neutron in the medium term. If you could turn 1 or 2 of those into, human capable launches, then you're going to be able to charge upwards of 4x what the normal Neutron launch is, just based off of the analog data from 2022 from SpaceX, meaning the $200 million that they got per launch for human capable. So I think that's another avenue that could be included into that. And so if that's the case, you could start to add up a lot of revenue and a lot of net income at that point. Overall, I mean, I don't know if that's answering your question, whether or not a $75 billion market cap, in your case, $150 share price is plausible. But to me, I think that there's a lot of avenues that have and uncertainties on an upside potential in terms of total addressable market growth that we have yet to be able to quantify, just based off of the fact that we're still so early on in the journey of Rocket Lab. So.
Yeah, and it's so interesting. I just saw someone commented that it's like, is that it? You guys think it's 75 in 10 years? Like, why would we even hold the stock now? And I'm like, my answer to this comment is like, yeah, this is when you see that how much the price has ran, because we were saying the same thing when the stock was at $3 and $4, and that's when we were building majority of our position. And like the price has run a lot, like there's no denying it. And you know, when you run this much, then you start to price in, you know, more and more future execution and more future perfection. So just keep that in mind. At $4, they were basically buying a discounted launch company and got space systems for free and got all the constellation and you know, space infrastructure as a call option on the stock, and everything paid out and then some, as we thought. But now we're not at $4 anymore.
No, I think that's a wise way to put it, and I think that we'll know more in the coming 2 to 3 years, because there's a lot of things coming to a head. A lot of the Artemis missions are getting started to ramp up, and once that happens, it's Artemis, for everybody to recognize, is NASA going back to the moon as a stepping stone to eventually go to Mars. And so we'll see a lot of things. Somebody mentioned the gateway. That's a piece that I think Rocket Lab can play into. We'll see the Mars return samples, sample returns being a huge gateway to future revenue growth. So there's just a lot of things that I think at the moment we can't quantify because we're still so early. And so it's really easy for me to kind of see us getting to a $25 to $50 billion market cap. I think that's easily in the cards with what we know today. But I think it's like Palantir, right? Palantir is continuing to unravel things that we don't even know about in terms of what's possible and capable for these sorts of systems that they're putting into place. So,
yeah. Cool. We go over to the next one, and I mean we just go over the news. There's a new launch this coming week. I believe it's on Saturday. It's on the day of the Rocket Lab Weekly, so maybe we will be covering that live, and then doing the Rocket Lab Weekly. We see. I feel that the Electron launches are less and less relevant for the company, and clearly management feels the same way because they stopped guiding for Electron launches. They just guide for overall revenue now. By the way, do you think that was a smart move, or what did you think about this move that they stopped guiding for Electron?
I mean, I don't think they stopped guiding per se. I think it's
the number of launches they stopped. Like they are saying now we expect the revenue between this and this, but they don't say we expect 5 launches.
I think it's I don't know, for example, exactly why they didn't specify the split like they normally do. I think it could be a factor of 2 things. I think it could be that something happens within the space systems business that makes it go up or down or sideways. And same thing with the launch side, right? I mean, I think it would be hard pressed for people. I think what they probably did is they kind of gave an idea of what the base case likelihood is for 4Q based off space systems delivery, as well as what might happen for 4Q. I think that there's still a wide range of launches that could happen just based off of what we're seeing. I mean, some people are starting to think that there's going to be a second HASTE launch here in the 4th quarter, just based off of some whispers that people are hearing. So if that's the case, then you're going to be closer to potentially that 18 launch range potentially, right? And there's still hope for that. And if that's the case, that can, if you get 1 or 2 more launches in the quarter, depending on what kind it is, specifically for HASTE, I think they can charge a little bit more because of the security aspect of things. I've heard, at least that's what they've noted in previous calls, and I should probably clarify that if I'm going to keep that notion in my mind. But 1 or 2 more launches can be $15 to $20 million more in the quarter. But it could as easily be the fact that space systems, 1 or 2 more satellites are shipped to whomever. And if that's the case, then they can realize that in the quarter as well. So,
yeah. Cool. We go to the next one. Elon Musk seemed to have been listening in on the earnings call of Rocket Lab, which is, I guess, pretty good. We are definitely going mainstream and getting the attention of a lot of people. I don't know what we can. I mean, it's just, you know, drama and banter. That the Falcon 9 line, some people think that it was like not transparent enough, that it's so much more than all the other rockets. I don't know how they could have made it more transparent. It's says it here in the line that it's like 109 launches, even though this chart shows 14. Do you have any comments on this, or we just go to the next one?
what specific comment? Sorry.
Know that there is like this drama about this slide of the presentation, and a lot of people pointed out that it was like not perfectly done.
Yeah, I mean, I always look at things when there's such a large discrepancy. I like, I do see that they put the parentheses in there. That's nice, but to me, I would have put some sort of break, like some squiggles or something like that, to show that there's a group of volume missing here. That obviously the scale has been adjusted to make it fit, but that's just me.
Yeah. Anyways, substantially, it doesn't. I mean, if they would have done it to scale, then Falcon 9 is so big that you cannot see the difference in the other rockets. So there was no malicious intent here. It was more like, you can't see anything else other than the Falcon 9. All right, we go on to the next one. This is interesting. Now we get into the space news segment. So there is a new administration, and they have a DOGE, a Department of Government Efficiency, that is going to be cutting a lot of things, recommending for Trump to cut. And this apparently is very good for Rocket Lab, as we heard from Peter Beck's CNBC interview. And there is rumor that all of the SLS Space Launch System rocket and program is going to be canceled. This is a program that I think has cost $20 to $30 billion and is really late. And it kind of feels like if Starship is ready, it's like obsolete on arrival. Like it's a non-reusable rocket. I think it costs like 100 or 10 to 100 times more to launch than Starship. So what are your thoughts regarding this? Is it good or bad? And
well, I don't know if it's 10 to 100 times more, but I don't think that the SLS...
it's 2 billion. I think it's 2 billion a launch. That's what I remember.
Let me see. Yeah, I guess you're right. Let's see. SLS as of November, the report, at least for 4 launches, Artemis, the per launch production and operating costs would be $2.2 billion. But I thought, yeah, I guess it is. Okay. The initial cost of $2.5 billion per flight. Interesting. What was I thinking? Oh, you know what I was thinking? I was thinking of the Vulcan rocket being like over 100 million per launch or something of the like. But I agree with respect to, regardless of whether it's 2 billion, 150 billion, whatever. I mean, you got to go with whoever is most competitive, right? As long as it's a place where it's fair and continues to have efficiencies. So my fear is the following. My fear is that it's going to be so complex that eventually you're going to have so many people drop out that, and this is positives and negatives depending on how you look at it, right? So from a government perspective, you want to have somebody that is the cheapest as well as most efficient and safe to get and to do whatever objective you want. From a owner perspective, of like owner meaning us being Rocket Lab shareholders, you want the most per launch. So there's kind of this like quagmire of interests going on that you need to think about. And so I agree from a government perspective, I don't want to be spending $2.5 billion per launch. I mean, I'd rather my tax dollars go to somebody like Rocket Lab or SpaceX that's able to do it. However, at the same time, I want to make sure that there's a sufficient amount of players in there that they continue to focus on maximizing efficiency, maximizing costs. So even if, for example, there's let's just say 3 or 4 players, it's likely that the cost of these things are going to continue to go down rather than up. And so right now, I think, for example, why Rocket Lab is able to charge more and more per Electron launch, and they've gone from like a $4 to $5 million initial sales price for Electron to now creeping in on $10 million, is because there's so few other people out there that are able to provide. Now, of course, that doesn't mean if you have inflation and everything, the like costs don't eventually go up. But I'm talking about if you kind of remove the cost of inflation, that hopefully the efficiencies of these things continues to drive the amount of pounds that you can fly up into space per dollar way up. And as we've seen that since SpaceX has kind of been brought online. And that was part of the reason why Obama, in my opinion, kind of cut things off in 2013 as it was, because you saw kind of a stagnation of how much costs you were being charged because of these old typical government contracts where there was no efficiencies being made. So I'm kind of scratching my head a little bit. I just want to make sure at the end of the day there's enough competitors that it makes it worthwhile, and there's nobody that can take advantage of the system.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting with the SLS is, like a lot of people said, like, why was it developed in the first place? And the thing is that when they started developing it before Elon started developing the Starship, and then they were in the middle of the development when Elon started really getting serious about Starship. And if you think about it, like at that time you didn't have a guarantee, and I mean technically you still don't have a guarantee that Musk is going to pull off Starship. It just looks like 99.999% sure at this point. And the one key advantage that rocket has is if you're launching something to like on interplanetary missions. So like if you're launching something to Mars, Jupiter, or something of the like, the SLS rocket can go like from launch to the Mars orbit, whereas Starship has to be launched, set in a parking orbit, and then it has to be refueled with like 5 other starships, and then it can launch into interplanetary orbit. And this space refueling is a completely, even still today, is an untested, like we still don't know if SpaceX is going to pull that one off. That's a question mark. So I understand why it was not canceled before, because if you would cancel it and SpaceX wouldn't follow through on the Starship, then you would be in a situation that you don't have a vehicle to go to outer space. But now that Starship is doing as good as it is doing, I see that like this vehicle has been basically out innovated. And yeah, as Curtis says, you just need to cut the loss on it, and that's what it is.
That's the problem when companies, and this is always the biggest fear as companies grow, and I have this fear with Palantir, I have this fear as well with Rocket Lab. There's inefficiencies that get built into organizations to an extent, and there's a law, I forget what the name of the law is basically, but it's basically states that and it's probably imperfect, but the general equation for it is the square root of the amount of employees are the ones that do 50 to 80% of the work. The number's wrong. So basically, if you have 10 employees, 2 to 3 of those employees are doing the majority of the heavy lifting at the office. If you have an employee count of, let's say, 100, then 10 employees are the ones that are really doing the majority of the work and generating most of the revenue. And so you start to see that like the number of employees continues to grow at a very linear rate, but the amount of people actually doing the hard work is almost a very small fraction of that over time. And so my fear is that's what ends up happening with a lot of these companies, is because then you lose you get so large that you lose the ability to make quick decisions, and you have so many checks and balances that for some reason just cancel each other out. You have so many other people that are saying and thinking one way versus another, and then you just have inevitable inefficiency in the middle. And so it almost goes to the fact that like sometimes organizations just need to be broken up. And to me, I think that that's something it might be Pareto's principle. That name sounds familiar. So, but my thought process is that's likely what happened. You had these big companies that were able to establish and do so much so early on in the space program that they ended up being able to be so fat happy and sit around, smoke cigars, and not necessarily have to do a bunch of work. And they ended up, instead of doing the hard things, doing the things like, oh, we'll get to it tomorrow, being slightly lazy, and not really trying to push things forward, because in reality, what's the rush, right? I mean, if you were to get it done today versus tomorrow or the next week, it's not like we're at war with Russia at the moment, like we were maybe in the Cold War times. So it makes you think a little bit about how the incentive system is really set up for these guys, and is it appropriate to do it that way?
Yeah. All right. So next space news is about another rocket company biting the dust in a way. ABL, that is the space launch company that was able to launch from 3 or 4 containers. And I think that their niche was responsive launch, that they were able to, like if the army needed a rocket launched in a specific location, you could just drive the containers there, and you would launch really quick from there. Which is a concept, by the way, I never understood, because the rockets, like that's the point of them, like they really fast go to places, right? So I don't understand why you need to launch from a certain location when, whatever. And the point is that they are throwing in the towel, and they are doing a hard pivot into missile system defense. And they are leaving the small launch market, and they write down their experience, and they're saying that the market is very mature and the opportunities are decreasing, and they didn't see a way how they make a dent in this very tough market. What are your thoughts on this, Mr. Matt?
It just goes to show that it's going to be an ever hard place to continue to survive.
Looks like they were not able to survive.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be continually more and more difficult, right? And I don't think this is going to be the last one that we see in the next 12 months. I think you'll see Relativity also drop out of the race, and I don't think you'll ever see Astra launch again, as much as they like to say that they're going to launch the Astra 4 rocket. I think
they're not only going to launch, they're going to be profitable next year, Matt. Stop this madness.
We will see.
Your pessimism.
We will see.
Yeah. Sorry, I cut you off. Were you?
No, that's it.
Okay. Yeah. So that was the space news, and I was thinking now we come to Rocket Lab earnings that happened. If you guys noticed, I kind of liked the earnings. I don't know if you saw it. It was easy to miss on the portfolios. It's not much change. So Matt, what are your key takeaways from this earnings? And is there things you like, and are there things you don't like in this earnings?
Is there anything I don't like? Well, I would say just the earnings piece, right? So take the conference call piece out of it. The earnings piece, I think, was kind of as expected. I don't think that there was too much in there that people were surprised about. I think what really moved the stock, as we kind of alluded to last time, was really the announcements for Neutron, the continuous ability to sign up more customers for Electron, the thoughts and progress notes on the Mars sample return, and I think that in the continued progress of hitting milestones for Archimedes and subsequently Neutron. I think that's where the big push in the stock prices kind of come from, to people recognize that we're going to be one of two companies that has a reusable orbital, which is a very key word there, rocket. The first obviously being the Falcon 9 from SpaceX. And some people might say, what about the Shepard rocket from Blue Origin? That doesn't really go orbital, so you can neglect that. But the Neutron rocket will be reusable and designed to be reusable from day one. So it should be great. I also think that people were ruling out the NSSL deal, and so to hear that they were still in contention for that makes people, I think, a little bit happy, knowing that that could be a huge revenue source from 2026, 2027 onwards.
Yeah. So I agree with you. My controversial take, apparently I'm a Rocket Lab bear now, is that I'm super happy with these earnings, but I didn't see anything exactly as you said, like it was as expected, like the earnings was as expected. We got a Neutron customer, but we knew that we would get Neutron customers, right? And what do you call it? One thing that I would say that, the earnings was insanely good. And yeah, the reaction to the earnings, the 50% up the day after, because at one point we were 50% up at $22. I think that was unwarranted. I think a correct reaction would have been, a 10 to 15% up day, maybe. So that is my controversial take. I'm an extremely happy shareholder with the earnings. And there was one thing that I was not necessarily, okay, I'm just gonna say it. So they asked Adam Spice if they are still planning, because now they're getting customers and you can see that there is demand for Neutron, and they asked him, is there a way for Rocket Lab to scale Neutron faster? And he said, or I think it was Peter Beck who answered it, and he said that it's Adam Spice is also asking him this every day, and unfortunately, due to engineering reasons, it's like if you throw more money and more people at this, it will not make it faster. It will just make it cost more. And I kind of believe Peter on this point, but it also means that, the revenues that we're getting, there's not going to be a surprise. I feel that the market was pricing in a surprise that with Palantir, we're going to have accelerated revenue growth, and we're going to have this big surprises quarter after quarter. We guided for 100 million this quarter, but it ended up being 180 million because, we're scaling so fast on the rockets. And unfortunately, there's no chance of that happening, And I was hoping that there would be a chance of maybe they can accelerate and they would go from, demo launch to maybe 4 launch and then maybe 8 launch. But apparently there's no way on this.
I would view it almost as and once again, I think that this is something that needs to be maybe digested, but I know demand is going to be there, but how quickly can it grow, I think, is where it really shows up. I think that the thing that gives me confidence is we've been able to see the demand for the Falcon 9 grow, even if you were to, I think that there's 50 or so percent of the Falcon 9 launches are specifically for SpaceX, but what you are seeing is over 100 launches per annum at this point. So you could see at least 50 of those launches are actually for customers. And so if you're able to tap into that just even a little bit, I think that you have more than enough demand for the Falcon 9 versus you don't see many small launch vehicles, right? So if you're comparing Electron versus Neutron, I think has the more demand. We've seen pretty much the demand for Electron, and you don't really see many other small launch companies setting off rockets into space, right? So, and it could just be that there's so few players that it's hard to acknowledge. But what I'm trying to get after is I think that when you hear him say 135 for 2025, 2026, 2027, respectively, I think that that's him being somewhat cautious. I think if the opportunity is there, they'll get it. Especially, let's just take in, for example, they're able to get a successful landing on the first or second try. That will be a huge positive, right? And then I guess my question also would be is, how quickly do you reuse the Neutron vessel, right? Is that something where you launch it? Let's just say, for example, they do that first launch and it's successful, and it were to, and I know they're not going to immediately capture it, but let's just say they do land it. It's like, let's just say the second or third one they land actually on land, and they're able to reuse it in, say, a couple months' time. Do they do their own testing with that? Do they have a commercial customer on there? To me, out of pocket, I would just make sure that I would do it on my own, because it's only going to cost you, let's just say, it's not $55 million cost, right? It's going to be a fraction of that, if not half of that. And so to me, I would come out of pocket to try to figure out that reusability piece first as fast as possible. And if that's the case and you're able to start getting that reusability factor in, then there could be more than 5 launches in 2027. But I think that the problem is right now is that first launch, it's going to be sitting at the bottom of the ocean unless they recover it. The second and third launch is going to be for another customer. So, the thing is will they be able to be successful on landing that on land? If the answer is yes, at what point is that reusable launch being done? And at that point, you're already on to year 3. You know what I'm saying? Like, so to me, I think that the real scale of things really starts to show up maybe in the middle of year 3, beginning of year 4, where you're able to get some of these systems in place. You're able to get the reusability on pat. And that's where I think you could start having this quick turnarounds comparable to what you've seen for some of the Falcon 9 rockets being launched something like 17 or 18 times. And I think one of them's actually been launched more than 20 times at this point. So there's that piece. And so at what point do you eliminate it? I think that from what I've been hearing, maybe some previous notes, and I haven't seen an update on it in a couple quarters, but I think that they're hoping that these Archimedes engines could be used up to 10 times. And so does that mean you can use the entire Neutron body 10 times? Does that mean, what is the fatigue that's being put into and reusability that's being put into some of these things? And I think that that's something that also needs to be tested. So I think to me, it doesn't matter 10 years down the road. I think that what really matters is the next 2 to 3 years. That is going to be from what impacts the valuation. But I guess it then goes back to and trying to understand what is the company being valued on? And this is something that we struggle with all the time. Is it being valued on fiscal year 25? Is it being valued on fiscal year 27, 28, 29? Is it being valued as what it could be, which is the future SpaceX of kind of New Zealand and the West Coast? Like what is exactly it being ranked on? So I think that's the tough part.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's so funny because when the stock was at $4, we knew it was crazy cheap, right? But it's so funny that when we came up to the 10, 15, 20 level, it's like, okay, I can justify the price of today, but the only way I actually made a little table here. I think I even showed it in a video. And the only way that I can justify it is that I look out to 2035 and I put a space infrastructure into the calculation. And keep in mind, we don't know anything about what the space infrastructure is going to be, how it's going to be scaling, what is the margins. And with that calculation, if I add that in and I go out to 2035, I can see a fair value today of 25, right? But the only thing that I don't like about these types of valuations is now I'm like pricing in perfection, like I'm pricing in that Neutron is scaling, the exact way they say that they're scaling. Space Systems is growing like 25% every year, 10 years straight. the space infrastructure is, straight away giving them revenue, straight away very high margin, straight away they have, a lot of customers. And I feel that, like, if those assumptions are true, it's still good to buy the stock at here, but your risk reward is not the same when we were at $4. So it's a struggle. Valuation is an art. Definitely, we all agreed that at $4 it was dirt cheap. At the valuation that we are at today, I don't know what is your. I'm sure a lot of people want to know, like, are you adding to your position at this level? Are you holding? Are you like, what is your short-term price prediction?
I had it at 17, but I'm out of money right now. So I'll just be blunt there. I'll change the question a little bit. What I think is going to happen, and granted, take this with a grain of salt, because my price prediction was $15 by the end of 2025, and obviously we're above that, right? And so I need to redo my Seeking Alpha article, and hopefully you guys will read, and I appreciate all your support with respect to that, because writing's not my strong suit. Just coming onto YouTube and talking out of my ass is. So that's why I do these every week, and I don't write an article every week like Steven Fiorillo, and he gives me shit for it all the time. Because I actually am a pretty decent writer when I put my mind to it. I'm just not as good at it like he is. So I'm changing the question here a little bit. My thought is the following. My thought is the stock will continue to be extremely bullish in terms of valuation. I think you'll see a spike up when we get the Neutron vessel up into orbit. I think you will see a drastic sell-off in the company when you actually get to profitability, because I think you're going to see so many people start to be like, holy shit, this company is just getting to profitability and it's only pennies on the dollar. And, they haven't necessarily come in. They're still so early. Is it actually ever going to be able to make it? I find it very, how do I say this? Very unlikely that it survives a large pullback period at some point. Because basically you're going to have all this hype of, oh, there's a Falcon 9 equivalent rocket out there that it's a competitor. But then you're like, oh, shit. Then you're going to have the people that are like, oh, shit. They're just starting to get familiar with the stock, whether it's Wall Street, retail, etc., that are like, oh, but they don't make any money. They're probably going to go bankrupt, right? I remember this whole thing with Palantir. People were really hyped up about it. And it's the same thing with, I feel like, a lot of stocks where, and it's actually pretty funny clip in Silicon Valley, if you guys remember, where basically like we need to start making money and we need to start making revenue. And the guy freaked out. He's just like, no. He's like, you don't ever talk about revenue, because if you start to make revenue, you start to make profits, then they try to add multiples onto it, and then they dog shit the stock price. Versus if you're kind of pre-revenue and you're pre-profit or anything like that, it's always what it can be in the future, and you can kind of arm wave, and you don't necessarily have to put dollars and cents to it. It's all about what the potential of the company is. And so I have a feeling you're going to go through some peaks and troughs associated with that. So in terms of where I think the company's value is today, what it should be, I don't know. What I can say is if you look at it from where we're going to be in fiscal year 2027, which I think will be $1 billion a year plus, I think that we're cheap in that respect. And I think that there's an opportunity to kind of grow 20 to 30% easily from where we are today, which I guess would put the stock closer to 25 or 26 bucks. But then again, sorry, go ahead.
No, in my valuation also 27, 1 billion, 51 million. But yeah, so we are very much on the same page. But go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think 2025, you're going to see closer to $650 million in revenue. I think the thing that for Q4, which was alleviating, was you're getting closer to that $150 million quarter run rate. And I think that will be about the average that we see in fiscal year 25. So my thought process is that we'll get closer to 600 million. And then if you add in the fact that you start getting 20% increase likely year over year for space systems, that would put you close to 700 to 750 million in revenue. Then you add in 150 to 170 million dollars for Neutron launches. You get really close in 2026 to $1 billion in terms of revenue. But that's just my kind of thought process. But I can kind of sit here with a straight face and guarantee almost if things go as kind of planned that you will have $1 billion quarter in 2027. If not $1 billion quarter, sorry, $1 billion year in 2027, and very high likelihood that you get closer to 1.1 to 1.15 in 2027.
Yeah. I agree with you. And Rocket Lab is a very volatile stock. It has always been. So I'm saying this for the people who are maybe new to the stock. Like, it could be that we go to 30. It wouldn't surprise me. But it also wouldn't surprise me if we have a pullback down to 10, and we stay there for some time. I mean, I think for me that's what I think is the most likely is that we're going to go sideways a little bit. Like hit 20, go down to 15, and then like hit 20 again, go down to 15. But I'm really not good on short-term price prediction, as evidenced by my covered calls on Rocket Lab. But I am good on buying the stock at the right price before they start shooting up. Cool. I think that we went through everything that we planned to go through. I don't know if the audience has any questions that they want us to answer.
Yeah, I mean, people are asking like, what would I buy it at? It's like, well, it's hard for me to tell. Like if you're asking what I would buy it at, it's going to be very different than what somebody else would. I mean, if it was me, and you don't have, if I didn't have any stock, I would be buying it today, regardless of the price. The thing that's nice with me is that I have other opportunities that are out there, that are in the market. Do I think that all of them are as good as Rocket Lab? Maybe, maybe not. Probably not, to be honest with you. But it doesn't mean that, to me, I'm still a little bit of a sissy when it comes to diversification, and I still like to have a little bit. But to me, it's not like I have a small starter position, right? I've already established a position. And to me, I'd rather continue to add here. I don't know what my current cost basis is, but I added in the 17s. Would I be adding here in the 19s? I don't think so. Not right now. I've kind of already, I need to kind of look at what my cost basis is, because even though I said I wouldn't go over 100 grand, I've definitely got over 100 grand in terms of cost basis. So I had to find out, if I'm kind of comfortable with how much I've already invested. But that being said, I think it's all based off of risk tolerance, time horizon, all these sorts of things that I think people throw out the window and they don't actually truly think about. Because what ends up happening is you have people joining in at the $17, $18, $19 range because they talk and hear about people saying, well, I think it can go to $50 a share, or I think it can go to $75 a share, just like we were talking about in this episode. But they don't hear about or think about the volatility that's going to happen between now and then. And what ends up happening is they buy at 17, 18, 19, and then when the going gets a little bit tough and people are, unfortunately selling out, because you have people in the stock that have been in since pre-IPO or pre-SPAC days that have cost basis of $1 to $2 a share, if not less. They've been in since the early 2000s, late 2000s, if not early 2010 timeframe, that they're finally ready to retire, get out, put something into a small yielding dividend stock or something like that, and not have to worry about working anymore. And you have people like ourselves that have a completely different investment philosophy. And so I'm not saying one's right or wrong. I just think that you have to recognize that everyone's playing a different game in the market. And so you'll have big players that own 10 to 15% of the company and decide this is it, right? We've made our initial investment back. They could be companies that literally focus on companies that get to the first 10 to $15 billion. And they say, at that point, it's too big for us. We need to sell out of it and put that back into a bunch of different things like venture capital funds that literally focus on companies that have $100 million market cap or less valuations to be able to hopefully 10, 20, 30x their money. There could be investors within Rocket Lab that say at this point, can they get to 250 billion? Maybe, but what we can guarantee is they're only going to get to 20 or 30 billion based off their valuations. They say that 2 to 3x from here isn't enough. We can go find something else. And so you might have big shareholders selling out, and that would cause a huge dip in the price. And so I think people need to focus on what's right for them, and will they be willing to be okay if the stock went back down to $10, even if they bought it at 17, 18? Would they be willing to buy more, or would they freak the fuck out and sell? And next thing you know, miss the boat on when it legs up again. So I can't answer some of these questions for you. It's something that you need to answer for yourself.
Very, very well said. And I want to answer one audience question. Jed Luke, Vince is bullish. I'm under on cover calls as well, hoping for pullback to roll or buy those back. I'm in the same situation. When we were at $5, I wrote cover calls with $8 strike. So I'm very heavily underwater. But even if there doesn't come a pullback, I looked at what I can do, and I can basically roll up. It's a bit late. I don't remember the exact numbers. I do have to pay to roll up and go out to 2026 January, and I can go up to like $14 or $15. And then I can do that again every year, but I have to pay for these. So I think that I have to pay like a couple of bucks a share. So like I'm increasing my cost basis on Rocket Lab because I'm not willing to lose the share. And somebody asked if instead we were willing to consider, leaps, like having leaps options on Rocket Lab. And my thing with the leaps is I was considering maybe changing maybe losing my shares to the covered calls. And then I would get paid a very hefty sum because I would sell it at a huge profit. And then I could buy leaps to control the same amount of shares as I had before. But the problem is, let's say you buy $25 or $30 leaps that are 2026. And let's say you get a huge dip on the market and Rocket Lab is $10 when the price comes. Then your options go to zero, whereas your stocks, they never go to zero. And the leaps options, you can also roll, but then you have to pay for them again. So if you have that, I couldn't make sense of it with my risk tolerance to change it over to leaps. Only if we would go back down to like $3 or something, but not where we are here, because the stock can go any way.
Yeah, there's certain things that you can do to help chip away at it, but there's no big solution. It just goes to show. I tell people this all the time, and I'm saying this, with my tail between my legs, because I have some cover calls in Palantir as well, but that are underwater for sure. So, but my hope is they're not nearly as bad as what some people might be in terms of Palantir as well as Rocket Lab. But the question is like, when you sell these cover calls, would you actually be willing to sell them at that price? And I think a lot of times people lie to themselves for the short-term income. And so, exactly and I've been in the same place as well. So it's like, I think one of the things that I've seen that I've recognized is like, I don't want to say I'm like a wheeler or anything like that, but if you're wanting to buy more of the stock and you would hate to lose any of it, then instead of thinking about writing covered calls, it's probably better for you to sell puts, because if you actually want to buy more of the stock, then you can still generate the income, which is what you're looking for, and you'd be able to buy the stock cheaper versus the opposite. And I think it always goes back to, how do I say this? It always goes back to like understanding and fully thinking through what it is that you want to do. And to be very frank, like when you're in these up markets, it's very difficult because the markets, generally speaking, are always expanding in these very bullish markets, and so it's easy for you to get kind of caught with your hand in the cookie jar, as TJ likes to say. So I'm not saying this as I'm like some oracle or anything like that, because I get caught all the time with covered calls. But just always make sure. I think that some people are worse about it than others. The problem with covered calls is that you see the amount of 100% profit you can make day one, and so people are like, ooh, I can make $1,000 right now, and then they forget the fact that they're locking up their potential stock that could grow $20,000-$30,000 in the course of a couple months. So, Mr. Thompson, thank you so much. Much appreciated.
Yeah,
Goes right into the stock. So
yeah.
we're only 16 days away before I buy more with whatever YouTube money I get paid.
Awesome. What was I going to say? Julie Law, it's probably good I don't know how to do options, it sounds like. Yeah, I always say that it's my true belief that just picking good companies, like we did with Palantir, like the SoFi people did, like the Rocket Lab people did, you will do, I think, better than you could do with options. The problem with options is that you limit your downside and your upside. So when you sell puts, it's like you're agreeing to buy the stock at a price, but if the stock falls below, it's like you're still buying at that pre-agreed price, right? So you don't really buy at the bottom, and then when you write a cover call, it's like you're agreeing to sell at a win, but the stock can go much higher. So it's like you're both limiting your downside and your upside at the same time. And I think that the only time when it would be good for you to look at options is if you for some reason need cash flow from your portfolio, like you're planning to retire, or I don't know, for whatever reason you need cash flow. And the portfolio that I have is together with my dad, and he is planning to retire very soon. And if we cannot make cash flow from the portfolio, then he will have to sell out of positions. And we just think that that's very stupid. So and it's mostly me who handles the portfolio. So I want to learn how to do sensible options and create income on this. But just for your returns, you don't have to do options. Like, you will do amazing if you just buy stocks and you stick with them, and you know how to do valuations, and you buy at the right price when it's scary. You will do just as good, if not better, than with options. And I want to shout out for Brett Thomas. Thank you so much for this super chat. Cool. I think we covered a lot. It's been a very interesting week. It's going to be a very interesting next week. We have the Peter Beck interview coming up. We have rocket launches. I'm possibly getting a baby. So if I'm absent from live streams or the interview, you guys know why. And yeah, I want to wish everyone a very happy weekend. Thank you, Matt, for being here. And I'll see everyone whenever we see each other.
You're the man, dude. Good luck with everything, man. I'll talk to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Cheers.
Ciao, ciao.